June 1943. The 8th Air Force has been bombing Germany for 5 months. In those 5 months, they have lost over 400 bombers. 4,000 men. Dead, captured, missing. The Army Air Forces does not publish these numbers. They do not need to. Every crew at every base in eastern England knows. They count the empty beds. They count the empty chairs at breakfast. They do the math. And the math says this: the average B-17 crew will survive 11 missions before they are shot down. 11. But if you are a tail gunner, you do not get 11. You get less. You get the loneliest seat in the war, a 4-foot plexiglass box bolted to the back of a 60,000-pound target. You get 2 machine guns and 800 rounds and the absolute certainty that when the German fighters come, they are coming for you first. In the summer of 1943, tail gunners are dying faster than the Army can replace them, and nobody from the generals in London to the instructors in gunnery school has any idea how to stop it. Nobody except a 24-year-old staff sergeant named Michael Aruth, who has no business being brilliant, a factory worker's son. No college, no flight training, no special qualifications. Just a man who watched his friends die following the rules and decided the rules were the problem. What he did next was so reckless, so unauthorized, so completely insane, by every standard the military held sacred, that his own crew thought he had lost his mind. He had not lost his mind. He had figured out something that 2 years of official doctrine had missed. And by the time the war was over, he would destroy 25 German fighters from the most vulnerable position on the most targeted aircraft in the sky. This is how. May 14th, 1943. RAF Kimbolton. Staff Sergeant Michael Aruth steps off a transport truck and sees the B-17's lined up on the tarmac for the first time. They look enormous from the ground. They will feel very small once the shooting starts. He is assigned to the 527th Bombardment Squadron, 379th Bombardment Group. His aircraft is a B-17F named Tondaleo. His position is tail gunner. His pilot, Captain Robert DeSanders, shakes his hand and says 4 words. Don't get us killed. Aruth does not know yet what those words will cost him to honor. The first 3 missions are milk runs, short-range targets in occupied France, heavy fighter escort, minimal opposition. Aruth follows doctrine perfectly. He sits on his bicycle seat in the tail watches. The sky keeps his fingers near the triggers and waits. The instructors at Buckingham Army Airfield in Florida had spent 6 weeks drilling the procedure into his skull. Wait for 300 yards. Fire short bursts. Conserve ammunition. Discipline wins. Patience wins. The manual wins. He believes it. He has no reason not to. Mission 4, June 11th, Saint-Nazaire. Submarine pens. The fighter escort turns back over the French coast, and the Luftwaffe finds them 20 minutes later. Aruth watches a pair of Focke-Wulf 190s slide into position behind the formation about 1,000 yards out. They are not attacking yet. They are studying, picking targets. He can see the yellow noses. He can see the black crosses. His hands are on the triggers. 300 yards. The manual says wait. He waits. The Focke-Wulfs begin their run. Aruth watches the wingspan grow. 800 yards. 700. 600. His thumbs are shaking. 500. 400. He can see the muzzle flashes now. The Germans are already shooting. Cannon shells streak past Tondaleo. 300. He fires. 2 short bursts. The fighters blow past before he can adjust. Neither one is hit. Neither is Tondaleo by pure luck. But the bomber on their right wing is not lucky. Aruth sees the tail section shatter. The plexiglass disappears. The tail gunner, a kid from Ohio named Peterson, never fires a shot. The bomber drops out of formation. 8 parachutes come out. Aruth counts them twice. 8. Not 9. Not 10. 8. Peterson is still in there. That night, Aruth sits on his cot and cannot sleep. He keeps seeing Peterson's position disintegrate. He keeps running the numbers. The Germans opened fire at 600 yards. Peterson opened fire at 300. 300 yards of difference. At closing speeds of 600 miles per hour, 300 yards is approximately 1 second. Peterson died because he was 1 second late. 1 second of obedience. 1 second of following the manual. And Aruth keeps thinking, what if Peterson had fired at 600? What if he had fired at 700? The rounds would not have been accurate. They would have fallen short. They would have missed. But the German pilot would have seen them. Tracers arcing toward his cockpit. And what does a pilot do when he sees fire coming? He flinches. He maneuvers. He breaks off. He does not hold his perfect firing line and pour cannon shells into a tail position that is shooting back. Nobody attacks calmly when the sky in front of them is full of bullets. Aruth pulls out a notebook and starts calculating. Range, closure rate, tracer visibility, ammunition expenditure. He is not inventing a new tactic. He is solving a math problem. And the answer he gets terrifies him. Because the answer says the manual is wrong. The answer says patience is getting men killed. The answer says the only way to survive is to do the opposite of everything the Army Air Forces has taught him. Mission 5, June 22nd. Hüls, Germany. Synthetic rubber plant. Aruth does not tell anyone what he is planning. Not to Sanders, not the crew chief, not anyone. Because if he tells them, they will say no. And if they say no, he will have to choose between disobedience and survival. He does not want to make that choice. He wants to make it unnecessary. The fighters come at 11:30. 3 Bf-109s from the 6 o'clock low. Classic tail attack. Aruth puts his thumbs on the triggers and starts tracking the lead fighter at 1,000 yards. 900. 800. 700. He fires. Both guns. The tracers arc across the sky, falling short, dropping below the Messerschmitt. But the German pilot sees them. Aruth watches the fighter jerk. A tiny flinch. The nose dips. The wings wobble. The pilot is reacting. He is breaking his concentration. At 600 yards, Aruth's tracers begin climbing toward the target. The German breaks hard right and dives away. His wingmen follow. Not a single cannon round hits Tondileo. Aruth's hands are shaking. His heart is slamming against his ribs. It worked. God help him, it worked. The landing at Kimbolton. Crew Chief Sergeant Bill Hendricks meets them on the hard stand. He checks the ammunition. His face changes. 200 rounds, Aruth. 200. On one engagement. You want to tell me how you plan to survive a 6-hour mission to Germany shooting like that? Aruth looks at him. Ask Peterson how his ammo supply is doing. Hendricks opens his mouth, closes it, walks away. He does not bring it up again, but others do. Word travels fast in a bomber group. Tail gunners talk. By the end of June, half the 527th knows that Aruth is opening fire at ranges the manual calls wasteful. Staff Sergeant Jimmy Colton from the barracks next door corners him after dinner. You know what they're calling you. They're saying you're going to get your whole crew killed burning ammo like a maniac. Aruth does not argue. He says one thing. Tondileo keeps coming home. Colton has no answer for that. Because it is true, Tondileo keeps coming home. 3 missions, 4, 5, 6. Every time Tondileo comes home, and every week other bombers do not. By mid-July, the 527th has lost 3 aircraft, 30 men. The crews who followed doctrine. The crews who waited until 300 yards. The crews who conserved their ammunition and died with full belts. July 17th. Aruth has 12 missions now. He has passed the statistical average. He should be dead or captured by simple probability. Instead, he has 3 confirmed kills. 3 German fighters destroyed using a technique that no instructor ever taught, no officer ever authorized, and no manual ever endorsed. Captain de Sanders pulls him aside after debriefing. I don't care what the manual says. I don't care what Hendricks says. Whatever you're doing back there, keep doing it. Every mission we come back, that's 10 families that don't get telegrams. It is the closest thing to official approval Aruth will ever receive. It is enough. July 30th, 1943. The mission that changes everything. Target Castle, Germany. Deep penetration. 500 miles into enemy territory. 186 bombers. 123 P-47 escorts that will turn back over Belgium because their fuel tanks cannot carry them further. After Belgium, the bombers fly alone. 300 German fighters are waiting. Aruth loads 800 rounds into his Brownings and does not bother checking the manual. The manual is for men who plan to die politely. He plans to come home. The P-47s waggle their wings over Belgium and turn back. Aruth watches them go. He is alone now. 40 feet of aluminum between him and the nearest crew member. 2 guns, 800 rounds, and somewhere ahead, 300 pilots who want to kill him. The first fighters appear at 11:42. Aruth counts 8, then 12, then stops counting. There is no point counting what you cannot avoid. A Messerschmitt begins its attack run from the 6 o'clock high. Aruth tracks it through his gun sight. 800 yards. He fires. The tracers fall short. He adjusts. 600 yards. The rounds connect. Bright flashes along the engine cowling. The German breaks right, trailing smoke spiraling down into the clouds. First kill of the day. No time to think about it. The second fighter is already closing. This one comes in low, trying to slide under his field of fire. Aruth depresses the guns to their mechanical limit. The angle is wrong. He fires anyway. The burst forces the Focke-Wulf to pull up early. Cannon shells meant for Tondeleau explode in empty sky. 47 minutes. Wave after wave. Aruth fires at everything that moves. His barrels glow red. His ammunition counter drops like a dying heartbeat. 600, 500, 400. And then at 12:29 a Bf-109 comes straight at him from dead astern. Not diving, not maneuvering. Flying straight and level as if the pilot does not believe a tail gunner can hurt him. Aruth holds both triggers for 6 seconds. 100 rounds pour into the fighter. The engine separates from the fuselage. The wings fold backward. The wreckage tumbles past Tondeleau so close, Aruth can see into the cockpit. It is empty. 2 confirmed kills, 180 rounds remaining, and the mission is only half over. Aruth's mouth is dry. His hands are cramping from gripping the triggers. For one moment, just one, he closes his eyes. He thinks about his mother's kitchen in the Midwest. The smell of coffee on a Sunday morning. A screen door banging shut in summer wind. He opens his eyes. A Focke-Wulf 190 is diving on Tondeleau from the 5 o'clock. He swings his guns. He is too slow. The 20mm shells hit the tail section before he can fire. The impacts feel like a car crash. Plexiglass explodes inward. Metal fragments rip through his flight suit. His left arm goes hot, then cold, then numb. Blood runs down his fingers. His left gun jams. The feed mechanism is shattered. He has one gun, 63 rounds, a wounded arm, and 250 miles of hostile airspace between him and England. He wraps a scarf around the wounds. He wipes blood from his gun sight, and he waits for the next attack. Because Michael Aruth does not know how to do anything else. He does not know how to quit. He does not know how to die quietly. He knows how to fight with whatever he has left, even when what he has left is almost nothing. But what happens next? What happens when he has to defend a crippled bomber with 63 rounds and one functioning arm against an enemy that smells blood? What happens when the mathematics of survival collapse to a number so small it barely exists? That is where this story stops being remarkable and becomes something else entirely. Something that will force the entire 8th Air Force to admit that everything they believed about aerial gunnery was wrong. That story begins in Part 2. architected narrative structure for military historical script continuation. When we left Michael Aruth, he was bleeding in the tail of a crippled B-17 over occupied France. 1 functioning gun, 63 rounds of ammunition, 11 fragment wounds in his left arm, shoulder, and back, 250 miles of hostile airspace between him and England, 2 confirmed kills behind him, and the entire Luftwaffe between him and survival. Most men in that position pray. Aruth reloaded his right gun and waited. But here is the number that should have made the 8th Air Force pay attention months earlier. In the summer of 1943, bomber groups following standard gunnery doctrine were losing aircraft at a rate of 8% per mission. 8%. That meant for every 100 bombers that crossed into Germany, 8 would not come back. 80 men gone every single day the 8th Air Force flew, and the tail gunner position accounted for more casualties than any other crew station except the ball turret. The Army Air Forces had spent 2 years building a doctrine designed to keep these men alive. The doctrine was killing them, and the man who had figured out why was sitting in a shattered plexiglass compartment with blood freezing on the floor, wondering if 63 rounds would be enough to get him home. This is where everything gets worse. 1,331 hours. Somewhere over eastern France. Aruth sees them before he hears them. 2 Bf-109s sliding into position at the 7 o'clock about 800 yards out. His old instinct says, open fire now. His ammunition count says something different. 63 rounds, 3 engagements at 20 rounds each maybe. Maybe. He does the math while the fighters close. 700 yards, 600. His thumb hovers over the trigger. 500. He fires. 12 rounds. A short, precise burst aimed at the lead Messerschmitt's engine cowling. The tracers connect. Glycol coolant streams from the fighter like white blood. The German rolls inverted and dives away. The wingman breaks off without firing a shot. 51 rounds remaining. Aruth's hands are shaking so badly he has to press them against the gun mount to steady himself. Not from cold, not from pain. From the knowledge that the next attack might come with nothing left to fight it. But the next attack does not come. The Luftwaffe reaches the edge of their operational range over western France, and the fighters peel away, turning back toward their airfields. The English Channel appears on the horizon at 1447. Aruth stares at it through blood-smeared plexiglass and feels something he has not felt in 47 minutes. His own heartbeat. Tondaleo lands at Kimbolton at 1552. Aruth cannot climb out of his compartment. His left arm has locked in position, frozen blood cementing his flight suit to the bicycle seat. Ground crew cut him free and carry him to an ambulance. The flight surgeon counts 11 fragment wounds. Word spreads through the 379th within hours. 3 confirmed kills and 2 probables. While wounded, operating 1 gun. With 63 rounds. In the loneliest position in the war. That night, Captain DeSanders visits the station hospital. Aruth is lying on a cot with his arm bandaged from wrist to shoulder. DeSanders pulls up a chair. The intelligence officer wants your mission report. Aruth stares at the ceiling. Tell him the manual is wrong. DeSanders leans forward. I know it's wrong. You know it's wrong. Every tail gunner who's still alive knows it's wrong. But Group doesn't want to hear that from a staff sergeant. Aruth turns his head. Then who do they want to hear it from? DeSanders does not answer. He does not need to. They both know how the military works. A sergeant can die proving a theory. Only an officer can make it policy. 3 days later, the 379th Bombardment Group's gunnery officer, Lieutenant Colonel Harold Price, summons Aruth to his office. Price is Career Army Air Forces. West Point. 12 years of service. A man who believes in doctrine the way priests believe in scripture. He has reviewed the gun camera footage from the Castle mission. He has read the ammunition expenditure reports. He has the numbers in front of him, and he is not happy. Staff Sergeant Aruth, you expended 737 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition in 47 minutes of combat. The standard expenditure rate for a full mission is 400 rounds. You burned through nearly double the standard in less than 1 hour. Aruth stands at attention. Yes, sir. Price taps the report. The Army Air Force's gunnery doctrine is built on 2 years of operational research. It has been reviewed by ballistics experts, combat analysts, and officers with considerably more experience than you possess. And you decided to throw it away. The doctrine assumes the enemy waits for us to shoot first, sir. The enemy does not wait. Price's jaw tightens. What the enemy does or does not do is not your concern. Your concern is following the procedures that this Air Force has established. If every gunner decided to invent his own tactics, we would have chaos. Aruth says nothing. There is nothing to say to a man who values order over survival. Price continues. I am noting this conversation in your service record. If I receive another report of unauthorized ammunition expenditure, I will recommend disciplinary action. Dismissed. Aruth walks out of Price's office and finds Sergeant Bill Hendricks, the crew chief, waiting outside. Hendricks heard the whole thing through the door. He hands Aruth a cigarette. You know he's going to ground you if you keep this up. Aruth lights the cigarette. And if I stop, DeSanders gets a new tail gunner by September. Hendricks looks at him. You really think you're right about this? Aruth exhales smoke. I think Tondaleo has flown 14 missions and every crew member is still alive. I think the 527th has lost 4 aircraft this month, all tail attacks, all following doctrine. I don't think I'm right, Bill. I think the Graves are right. But being right means nothing without proof that an officer will accept. And that proof is about to walk through the door of the 379th Operations Building in the form of a man Aruth has never met. Brigadier General Frederick Anderson, commander of 8th Bomber Command's Operational Planning Division, has been reading casualty reports for 6 months. The numbers are getting worse. Anderson is not a man who accepts getting worse. He is a man who asks, why? August 2nd. Anderson arrives at Kimbolton unannounced. He is not here for an inspection. He is here because the 379th's loss rate is 11% below the 8th Air Force average, and he wants to know the reason. The group commander, Colonel Maurice Preston, gives him the standard answer. Good formation discipline, experienced crews, high morale. Anderson does not buy it. Every group commander tells me the same thing. Good discipline, good morale. And they're all losing bombers at the same rate, except you. Something is different here. What is it? Preston hesitates. Then he tells Anderson about the tail gunner on Tondaleo, about the unauthorized long-range engagement technique, about the ammunition expenditure that violates every line in the training manual, about the fact that Lieutenant Colonel Price wants to discipline the man, and about the fact that Tondaleo has survived 14 missions without losing a single crew member when the statistical average is 11. Anderson listens. He does not interrupt. When Preston finishes, Anderson asks one question. Where is this gunner now? 30 minutes later, Aruth is standing in a briefing room in front of a 1-star general. His arm is still bandaged. He has not slept more than 4 hours in 3 days. Anderson does not waste time. Explain it to me. Not the manual. Not what you were taught. Tell me what you actually do and why it works. Aruth talks for 15 minutes. He explains the geometry. He explains the closure rates. He explains why 300 yards is a death sentence and why 700 yards is a disruption zone. He explains that accuracy does not matter at long range because psychology matters. A pilot who sees tracers does not think about ballistics. He thinks about dying. And a pilot thinking about dying does not shoot straight. Anderson stares at him when he finishes. How many missions? 14, sir. How many kills? 5 confirmed. 3 probables. And your bomber? Never lost a crew member, sir. Anderson turns to Preston. I want gun camera footage from every mission this man has flown. I want ammunition expenditure reports. I want comparative loss data for every tail gunner in this group. I want it on my desk in 48 hours. He looks back at Aruth. Staff Sergeant, you are not being disciplined. You are being studied. The review takes 3 weeks. Anderson's staff analyzes gun camera footage from 14 missions. They compare Tondeleo's defensive record against every other aircraft in the 379th. They pull data from across the 8th Air Force 14 bomber groups, 3 months of operations, thousands of individual engagements. The conclusions hit 8th Bomber Command like a bomb. Tail gunners who engaged targets beyond 500 yards showed a 31% higher survival rate than those following standard doctrine. Not marginal, not questionable. 31%. The early fire disrupted enemy attack formations, forcing German pilots to maneuver defensively instead of holding stable firing platforms. The ammunition cost was higher, yes. Aruth's technique consumed roughly twice the standard expenditure rate. But the trade-off was devastating in its clarity. Gunners who conserved ammunition survived fewer missions. Gunners who burned ammunition aggressively survived more. Dead men had no use for reserve ammunition. Aruth had said that months ago. Now the numbers proved it. August 19th. The flight surgeon clears Aruth for duty. His fragment wounds have healed enough to grip the triggers. The headaches from his injuries are manageable. He walks to the flight line and finds a new Tondaleo waiting. The old bomber has been written off too much battle damage for repair. But the name transfers. The crew transfers. And the mission continues. By now, 3 other tail gunners in the 527th have adopted Aruth's technique on their own. Staff Sergeant Jimmy Colton, the same man who had called Aruth a maniac in June, is one of them. Colton approaches Aruth in the mess hall on August 20th. He does not apologize. He says something better. "I tried it your way over Hamburg last week. Opened fire at 6:50. 2 Focke-Wulfs broke off before they reached 400. My pilot said it was the first mission where nobody got hit." Aruth nods. "How's your ammo?" Colton grins. "Burned through 600 rounds in 20 minutes. Crew chief almost had a heart attack." "But you're here." "Yeah, I'm here." That conversation means more to Aruth than any medal ever will. September 1st. Anderson delivers his preliminary report to Major General Ira Eaker, commander of the 8th Air Force. The data is unambiguous. Aggressive early engagement from tail gunners reduces bomber casualties. The recommendation is clear. Revise the doctrine. Eaker authorizes a limited trial. 6 bomber groups will implement modified gunnery guidelines, permitting engagement beyond 500 yards when tactical conditions allow. The bureaucratic language is cautious. The implications are revolutionary. Meanwhile, Aruth flies 4 missions between August 26th and September 5th. 2 more confirmed kills. His total now stands at 7, with 5 probables. Other tail gunners in the 379th add another 7 kills of their own. The Luftwaffe's loss ratio against the Triangle K bombers is climbing. And the Germans have noticed. Luftwaffe intelligence officers identify the pattern in early September. American tail gunners are opening fire earlier, sometimes at ranges exceeding 600 yards. The debriefings come in from fighter bases across occupied Europe. The easy approach from 6 o'clock, once the safest angle against B-17 formations, is becoming dangerous. Pilots report tracers reaching them before they can establish firing platforms. The psychological impact is significant. A pilot watching tracers stream toward his cockpit at 700 yards does not care that the rounds are falling short. His hands move on the controls before his brain can calculate probability. The Luftwaffe responds in 3 phases: faster approach speeds, steeper dive angles, concentrated mass attacks against single bomber groups to overwhelm defensive fire. None of these solve the problem. Faster approaches degrade accuracy. Steeper angles make tracking harder. And mass attacks require coordination that the chaotic environment of a running air battle makes nearly impossible. The Germans are adapting. But they are adapting to something they do not fully understand yet. September 5th. The briefing for tomorrow's mission. Target Stuttgart. Ball-bearing factories. 500 miles into Germany. The longest penetration the 8th Air Force has attempted this month. Intelligence predicts over 100 fighters along the route. Flak batteries surrounding the city. The 379th will fly in the lead position of the combat wing. First into the fight, last out of danger. Maximum exposure to everything the Luftwaffe can throw at them. Aruth sits in the briefing room and listens. He does not look at the map. He looks at the men around him. Some of them are flying their second mission. Some of them will not fly a third. He loads 1,200 rounds into his Brownings that night, 400 more than standard. The extra weight does not bother him. Silence at the wrong moment bothers him. But Stuttgart will not be Kassel. Stuttgart will be something far worse. Because the Luftwaffe has been studying the new American tactics for 3 weeks now, and they have found something. Not a counter-tactic, not a new approach angle, something more dangerous. They have found a pattern. They know which bomber groups have changed their gunnery methods. They know which positions in the formation house the aggressive gunners. And on September 6, 1943, they are going to target those positions specifically with everything they have. Michael Aruth does not know this yet. He will find out at 10,000 feet over France, with 100 fighters climbing toward him, and a technique that the enemy has spent 3 weeks learning to defeat. The advantage that kept him alive is about to become the very thing that puts him in the crosshairs. Part 3 begins at dawn. Architected military narrative continuation with structural specifications. A factory worker's son from the Midwest looked at a doctrine that was killing American tail gunners and decided to break it. He opened fire at 700 yards when the manual said 300. He burned ammunition at twice the standard rate when every instructor said conserve. He was threatened with discipline, dismissed by career officers, and called a maniac by his own peers. Then, a one-star general named Frederick Anderson saw the data. 31% higher survival rate. The numbers did not lie. By early September 1943, 6 bomber groups across the 8th Air Force were testing modified gunnery guidelines based on what Staff Sergeant Michael Aruth had proven from the tail of a B-17 named Tondaleo. The doctrine was changing. The Luftwaffe was bleeding. And for the first time since the bombing campaign began, American tail gunners were surviving long enough to fight back. But the Germans were not fools. They had been studying. They had been adapting. And on the morning of September 6, 1943, they were ready to show the Americans that every advantage has an expiration date. Luftwaffe intelligence had done their homework. 3 weeks of debriefings from fighter pilots across France, Belgium, and Western Germany had produced a clear picture. Certain American bomber groups had changed their defensive tactics. The tail gunners in those groups were engaging at extended ranges, disrupting attack runs that had previously succeeded with mechanical reliability. The 379th Bombardment Group, flying under the Triangle K tail marking, was identified as the epicenter of the change. Oberst Walter Grabman, commanding Jog Division 3, held a tactical conference at his headquarters in Deelen, Netherlands on September 4th. The minutes of that meeting captured after the war recorded his assessment. The Americans had found a defensive technique that degraded the effectiveness of standard rear hemisphere attacks. The solution was not to abandon those attacks. The solution was to overwhelm them. Grabman's order was specific. On the next major American raid, fighter groups would concentrate against bomber formations identified as employing aggressive tail gunnery. Instead of spreading interceptors across the entire bomber stream, massed formations of 20 to 30 fighters would attack a single group simultaneously from multiple angles. No tail gunner, no matter how aggressive, could engage 30 targets at once. The mathematics of ammunition would do the rest. A gunner firing at 700 yards burned through rounds faster. Push enough fighters at him, and he would run dry. Then finish the bomber at leisure. The plan was elegant. It was also built on intelligence that was 72 hours old, and in aerial combat, 72 hours was a lifetime. But the Luftwaffe was not the only threat to Aruth's technique. Inside the 8th Air Force itself, resistance was hardening. Lieutenant Colonel Price, the 379th Gunnery officer who had threatened Aruth with discipline in August, had not changed his mind. He had simply been overruled, and overruled officers have long memories. Price submitted a formal memorandum to 8th Bomber Command on September 3rd, arguing that the modified gunnery guidelines would lead to catastrophic ammunition shortages during extended missions. His logic was precise. A standard mission deep into Germany lasted 6 hours. A tail gunner following Aruth's technique would expend his ammunition in the first 90 minutes, leaving 4.5 hours of defenseless flight time. Price cited Aruth's own Castle mission as evidence. The man had been reduced to 63 rounds before the return flight. Only the Luftwaffe's operational range limitations had saved him. On a longer mission, he would have been empty. And an empty gun was worse than a conservative one, because it gave the crew false confidence. They believed they were protected. They were not. The memorandum landed on General Anderson's desk the same day. Anderson read it. He could not dismiss it entirely because Price was not wrong about the mathematics. A gunner who burned 700 rounds in 47 minutes would run dry on a 6-hour mission. The question was whether the trade-off favored survival or ammunition management. Anderson picked up the phone and called Colonel Preston at Kimbolton. "Get Aruth's crew ready. I want them on the Stuttgart mission. Full ammunition load. And tell your gunnery officer that if this works, his memorandum goes in the shredder." But if it did not work, if Aruth ran dry over Stuttgart and Tondeleau went down because the tail position fell silent, Price would have his proof, and the entire experiment would die with it. September 6th, 1943. 0540. 187 B-17 climbs into overcast English sky. The target is Stuttgart. Ball-bearing factories that feed every tank, aircraft, and submarine in the German war machine. 500 miles into enemy territory. The longest penetration of the month. Aruth has loaded 1,200 rounds, 400 more than standard. The extra weight presses the tail down slightly during takeoff. He does not care about weight distribution. He cares about silence, the silence of empty guns at the worst possible moment. The P-47 escorts leave them over Belgium. The bombers press on alone. Aruth scans the sky and thinks about Price's memorandum. 1,200 rounds. 90 minutes of aggressive fire. The mission will last 6 hours. The math still does not work perfectly. But math never accounts for what happens when a man refuses to die. 915. The fighters find them over France. Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs rising from airfields in clusters. Aruth watches contrails multiply behind the formation. More than usual. Many more than usual. The Luftwaffe is not spreading thin today. They are concentrating. By 0940, intelligence estimates count over 100 interceptors tracking the bomber stream. And they are not attacking randomly. They are forming up. Organizing. Waiting. 916. The rear attacks begin. Not 2 fighters. Not 4. 12, BF-1. 09s pull up in a climbing attack from the 6 o'clock low. Aruth has never seen 12 at once. His stomach drops. 12 targets. 2 guns. 1,200 rounds. He does the division instantly. 100 rounds per fighter. Not enough. Not nearly enough if they all press home. He fires at 700 yards. Tracers reach toward the lead element. 2 fighters break off immediately. Muscle memory, survival instinct, exactly the reaction he has counted on for months. A third absorbs hits and falls away smoking. 9 keep coming. The cannon shells arrive before the sound does. Bright flashes across the formation. The B-17 on Tondeleau's left wing takes hits to its number 3 engine. Another bomber in the low squadron starts trailing fuel. Aruth shifts targets. He is not aiming anymore. He is hosing. Sweeping his guns across the attacking wave, filling the sky with tracers, making the air behind Tondeleau a wall of fire that any sane pilot would avoid. 600 rounds. 500. 400. Fighters flash through his field of view so fast he cannot count hits. He fires at shapes, at shadows, at anything with a black cross. 1031. The Sun Attack. A single Focke-Wulf 190 dives from directly above and behind, using the glare to mask its approach. Aruth does not see it until the cannon shells are already hitting. The tail section shudders. Plexiglass shatters inward. The world becomes noise and fragments and pain. 20-millimeter shrapnel tears through his flight suit, opens his arms, opens his scalp. Blood pours into his eyes. His left gun is destroyed. The receiver is shattered. The Focke-Wulf pulls away, trailing smoke from hits scored during its dive. Aruth cannot tell if he hit it or if someone else did. He does not care. He wipes blood from his eyes with his right hand and finds the remaining trigger. One gun. Wounded. Again. Blood freezing on the floor. Again. But this time he has more ammunition. This time he has options. Tondeleau holds together through the bomb run over Stuttgart. 11 minutes of straight and level flight, while the bombardier lines up the target. 11 minutes of maximum vulnerability. Aruth fires single-aimed shots during this phase, one round at a time. Each one placed. Each one a message to any pilot watching. This tail is not empty. This tail will kill you. The formation turns west at 11:15. 250 miles to the channel. Aruth checks his ammunition. 310 rounds. The extra 400 he loaded against regulations, against doctrine, against Price's memorandum. Those 400 rounds are the difference between an armed retreat and a defenseless one. The running battle across France lasts 90 minutes. Aruth engages 7 separate attacks. He fires in short bursts now, 15 to 20 rounds, placing them carefully. 2 more fighters fall away damaged. One is confirmed destroyed, spinning into farmland outside Reims. His 5th kill of the day. His 10th overall. The others break off or shift to easier targets. Bombers whose tail positions have already gone silent. But Tondeleau is dying. The cannon damage from the Sun attack has severed hydraulic lines, cracked structural members, and punctured fuel cells. 2 engines run rough. The pilots fight for every mile of altitude. Over eastern France, the decision is made. They cannot reach England. Dessanders's voice comes over the intercom, calm and precise. "We're going into the channel. Ditching stations. Everyone strap in." Aruth hears the words and feels nothing. Not fear, not resignation. Just exhaustion so deep it has become a kind of peace. He has fired over 900 rounds. He has destroyed or damaged at least 5 fighters. He has kept his crew alive through the most concentrated attack the 379th has ever faced. And now the ocean is coming up to meet them. Tondeleau hits the English Channel at 15:12 at 120 miles per hour. The fuselage breaks on impact. Aruth is thrown forward into the gun mount. His head strikes metal. Darkness swallows everything. He wakes in a life raft. British rescue boats are approaching. All 10 crew members have survived. Tondeleau lies at the bottom of the channel, carrying with her the evidence of everything Aruth proved and everything Price feared. Dessanders is floating in the raft next to him, bleeding from a gash on his forehead. He looks at Aruth. "How many rounds did you have left?" Aruth coughs seawater. 42. Dessanders closes his eyes and laughs, the kind of laugh that means something between relief and madness. 42 rounds and we're all alive. Tell that to Price. The Distinguished Service Cross citation arrives on October 14, 1943, the second highest military decoration the United States Army can award. It recognizes Aruth's actions on both the Kassel and Stuttgart missions. The language specifically credits his defensive fire with protecting his bomber during its most vulnerable moments. But the citation is not the point. The data is the point. Anderson's staff completes the full analysis by late October. 14 bomber groups, 3 months of operations, thousands of engagements. The conclusions are unambiguous. Tail gunners engaging beyond 500 yards show 31% higher survival rates. Bombers with aggressive tail gunners absorb 23% fewer critical hits. The disruption effect is consistent across all groups that adopted the technique. The Luftwaffe's loss ratio against modified groups is 40% higher than against standard groups. The formal policy change comes in November 1943. New gunnery guidelines authorize tail gunners to engage at extended ranges when tactical conditions permit. The language is bureaucratic. The meaning is revolutionary. What a staff sergeant proved from a bicycle seat in a plexiglass coffin has become official 8th Air Force doctrine. Price's memorandum goes unsigned. No one mentions it again. The impact cascades through the winter of 1943 into 1944. Bomber loss rates decline from 8% per mission to under 6% by February. Multiple factors contribute. Longer range. P-51 Mustang escorts arrive in theater. Improved aircraft systems enhance survivability. But the gunnery data is clear. Groups that adopted aggressive tailfire earliest show the steepest improvement curves. Captured Luftwaffe aircrew confirm the shift in interrogation reports. The tail approach against American formations has become, in the words of one German pilot, a lottery you do not want to win. Some fighter units shift entirely to head-on attacks, accepting the terrifying closure rates of a frontal pass in exchange for avoiding the concentrated fire now pouring from the rear of every B-17 in the sky. Aruth's final tally stands at 17, confirmed kills with 4 probables awaiting verification. Some records credit him with as many as 19. The number places him among the highest-scoring bomber gunners in the 8th Air Force. The Distinguished Flying Cross follows the Distinguished Service Cross. 2 air medals with oak leaf clusters recognize cumulative achievement. The Purple Heart acknowledges his wounds. By the time his combat career ends, a staff sergeant from the Midwest has accumulated more decorations than most pilots. But decorations go in drawers, and the man who earned them is about to disappear. Because what happens to Michael Aruth after the medals, after the doctrine changes, after the war itself ends, is a story that almost no one knows. A story of silence and memory, and the price that men pay for surviving what should have killed them. The fighters are gone now. The sky is quiet. And the loneliest job in the war is about to become the loneliest life after it. Part 4 is the chapter that history almost forgot. Orchestrated final military narrative installment with thematic depth. A factory worker's son looked at a doctrine that was killing men and broke it. He opened fire when the manual said wait. He burned ammunition when the instructors said conserve. He was threatened with discipline, called a maniac, and told he was gambling with his crew's lives. Then the numbers proved him right. 31% higher survival rates. 23% fewer critical hits. A formal policy change that rewrote 2 years of established gunnery doctrine for the entire 8th Air Force. 17 confirmed kills from the loneliest position in the war. The Distinguished Service Cross. The Distinguished Flying Cross. 2 air medals. The Purple Heart. Staff Sergeant Michael Aruth had done something that generals and ballistics experts and combat analysts with years of experience had failed to do. He had figured out how to keep tail gunners alive. But here is the part of the story that no one tells. Because what happened to Michael Aruth after the medals, after the doctrine change, after the last mission is not a story of triumph. It is a story of what war takes from the men it does not kill. And it begins with a headache that would not go away. The Stuttgart ditching on September 6th had looked survivable. All 10 crew members pulled from the English Channel. Aruth walked away from the rescue boat under his own power. The flight surgeon treated his fragment wounds, stitched the gash on his scalp, and noted mild concussion symptoms in his medical file. Standard procedure. Rest for a few days. Return to duty. Aruth returned to flight status on September 22nd. He flew 3 more missions. On October 3rd, during a raid on Frankfurt, he noticed something wrong. His vision blurred during the fighter attacks. Not from blood this time. Not from cold. The edges of his sight went soft, like looking through water. He blinked. He shook his head. The blur remained. He fired anyway. He hit nothing. For the first time in 20 missions, Michael Aruth failed to score a single hit. He told no one. October 7th. Another mission. The headaches had started 3 days earlier. Dull pressure behind his eyes that built through the afternoon and peaked at night. He could not sleep. He lay in his cot, staring at the ceiling of the Nissen hut, listening to other men breathe, feeling the pressure pulse with his heartbeat. On the mission, his hands shook on the triggers. Not from fear. He had made peace with fear months ago. His hands shook because something inside his skull was broken, and his body knew it, even if his mind refused to accept it. He engaged 2 fighters over Belgium. His tracers went wide on both passes. DeSanders noticed. After landing, the pilot found Aruth sitting on the hardstand, still in his flight suit, staring at the ground. "What's wrong with you?" Aruth looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. "I can't see straight." DeSanders did not hesitate. He walked Aruth to the station hospital himself. The flight surgeon's examination took 45 minutes. Vision tests, reflex tests, questions about the ditching, about the impact, about the moment. His head struck the gun mount. The diagnosis was post-concussive syndrome damage from the channel ditching that had not fully manifested until weeks later. The surgeon's recommendation was immediate and final. Grounded. No further combat flying. Aruth sat on the examination table and heard the words and felt something collapse inside him that had nothing to do with his injuries. He was not afraid of dying. He had proven that 20 times over. He was afraid of being useless, of sitting in a barracks while Tondaleo flew without him, of knowing that the tail position would be filled by a replacement who might follow the old doctrine, who might wait until 300 yards, who might die the way Peterson had died, because no one was there to show him the other way. "How long?" he asked the surgeon. "Permanent." Aruth stared at him. "I can still shoot." "You can't see straight, Sergeant, and the headaches will get worse before they get better, if they get better." Captain DeSanders visited that evening. He brought a bottle of whiskey that he was not supposed to have, and 2 tin cups. They sat outside the hospital in the October cold and drank without speaking for a long time. Finally, DeSanders said, "I'm putting you in for the DSC, for Kassel and Stuttgart both. You earned it 10 times over." Aruth took a drink. "I'd rather have my eyes back." DeSanders had no answer for that. Some things cannot be fixed with medals or whiskey or anything else the Army had to offer. Aruth's final tally, 17, confirmed kills, 4 probables awaiting verification that would never be fully resolved. 20 missions completed. Wounded twice. Ditched once. Grounded not by the enemy, but by the invisible damage that the enemy had left inside his skull. He shipped home to the United States in early 1944. The Army Air Forces, recognizing what he knew and what he could teach, assigned him to gunnery training at Buckingham Field in Florida, the same base where he had learned the doctrine he had spent 6 months destroying. He stood in the same classrooms in front of the same chalkboards and taught new gunners the opposite of everything he had been taught in those rooms. Open fire early. Disrupt the attack before it develops. Force the enemy to maneuver. Make him flinch. The students who passed through his courses carried his methods into combat over Germany, over the Pacific, over every theater where American bombers faced fighters. He never knew how many of them survived because of what he taught. He never asked. But the D-San was not in the medals. The legacy was in the men who came home. Here is what the numbers tell us about what Michael Aruth set in motion. In November 1943, the 8th Air Force formally adopted modified gunnery guidelines authorizing engagement at extended ranges. By January 1944, every bomber group in the theater had received updated training materials. The impact showed in the statistics. Bomber loss rates, which had peaked at nearly 8% per mission in the summer of 1943, declined to under 6% by February 1944 and continued falling through the spring. Multiple factors drove the improvement. The arrival of long-range P-51 Mustang escorts in early 1944 dramatically reduced the Luftwaffe's ability to attack bomber formations unmolested. Improved aircraft systems, better formation tactics, and attrition of experienced German pilots all played roles. But the gunnery data isolated a clear and independent effect. Groups that implemented aggressive tail fire showed measurably better survival curves, even when controlling for other variables. The disruption principle that Aruth had discovered in the Tale of Tondaleo. The idea that forcing an attacker to maneuver was more valuable than waiting for a perfect shot did not die with the B-17. It evolved. In Korea, B-29 Superfortress tailgunners facing MiG-15 jet interceptors adapted the same principle. The speeds were higher, the closure rates were terrifying, but the psychology was identical. A pilot who sees fire coming at him reacts before he thinks. The MiGs were faster than anything the Luftwaffe had fielded, but the men inside them were still human. They still flinched. In Vietnam, the principle migrated from manned guns to electronic countermeasures. The B-52 Stratofortress carried a tailgunner position until 1991, and the engagement philosophy owed a direct debt to the lessons learned over Germany in 1943. Disrupt first. Destroy second. Make the attacker's job harder before he starts it. The modern military calls it active defense. The concept appears in everything from missile defense systems to cyber warfare doctrine. The language has changed. The technology has transformed beyond anything Aruth could have imagined, but the core insight remains. Passive defense waiting for the threat to arrive before responding costs lives. Aggressive disruption reaching out to degrade the attack before it develops saves them. A staff sergeant with a high school education figured that out with 2 machine guns and a notebook in 1943. Defense departments with billion-dollar budgets are still applying the same principle 80 years later. But the deepest lesson of Michael Aruth's story is not about gunnery or tactics or technology. It is about what happens when the people closest to a problem are told to ignore what they see. The Army Air Force's gunnery doctrine was not created by fools. It was built by intelligent, experienced officers using the best data available. It made sense on paper, it worked in theory, and it failed in combat because the people who wrote it had never sat in a 4-foot plexiglass box watching German fighters close at 600 miles per hour. The men who had sat in that box, the men who knew the doctrine was wrong because they watched it kill their friends, were told to be quiet. Follow procedure. Trust the system. The system knows best. History is full of these moments. Billy Mitchell demonstrated the vulnerability of battleships to air power in 1921 and was court-martialed for his trouble. Ignaz Semmelweis discovered that hand-washing prevented childbed fever in 1847 and was ridiculed by the medical establishment until he died in an asylum. The pattern repeats because institutions protect their assumptions the way organisms protect their vital organs. Challenging doctrine is treated as an attack on the institution itself, and the institution responds with the full weight of its authority. Aruth was threatened with discipline for doing something that saved his crew's life. That sentence should disturb anyone who has ever worked inside a system that values compliance over results. The courage to break a rule is not the same as recklessness. Aruth did not throw away the manual on impulse. He studied the problem. He calculated the geometry. He tested his theory incrementally, adjusting based on results. He accepted the ammunition trade-off with open eyes, understanding the risk, and judging it acceptable against the alternative. That is not rebellion. That is engineering applied to survival. The distinction matters because every organization, military or civilian, faces the same question. When the manual says one thing, and reality says another, who do you trust? The men who wrote the manual from behind a desk, or the man in the tail position who can see the fighters coming? And there is one final detail that almost no one knows. In 1987, 3 years before his death, Michael Aruth received a letter from a man named Klaus Weinberg. Weinberg was a retired Luftwaffe pilot living in Munich. He had flown Bf-109s with Jagdgeschwader 26 in the summer and fall of 1943, stationed at Lille-Vendeville in northern France. He had attacked American bomber formations over 40 times. He had been shot down twice. The second time over Belgium in October 1943, the fire that hit his aircraft came from a B-17 tail gunner who opened up at extreme range long before Weinberg expected resistance. The tracers disrupted his approach. His cannon shells went wide. The return fire did not. Weinberg bailed out with burns on his hands and spent 6 weeks in a military hospital. He never flew combat again. 44 years later, Weinberg had tracked down the bomber group that had been flying in that sector on that day. The tail markings, the formation position, the records led him to the 379th Bombardment Group, and the 379th's records led him to the tail gunner, whose technique had by then spread to every aircraft in the formation. Weinberg's letter was short, written in careful English. He told Aruth that he had spent 40 years wondering about the gunner who had ended his war. He said he harbored no anger. He said he understood that both of them had been young men doing what their countries asked. And he said something that Aruth's family found remarkable. He said that the early fire had saved his life, because if the tail gunner had waited until 300 yards, Weinberg would have completed his attack run. He would have closed to point-blank range. And at point-blank range, the return fire would not have damaged his engine. It would have killed him. By shooting early, by disrupting the attack before it fully developed, the American gunner had forced Weinberg to take hits in a survivable way instead of a fatal one. The technique designed to protect bombers had also inadvertently given enemy pilots a better chance of surviving their failed attacks. Aruth never replied to the letter. His family found it in his desk after his death, folded inside the case that held his Distinguished Service Cross. He had kept them together, the medal and the letter, the proof of what he had done and the proof of what it had meant from the other side. Michael Aruth died on February 15, 1990, in St. Augustine, Florida. He was 70 years old. He was buried at the National Memorial Cemetery of Arizona 5 days later. The headstone lists his name, his rank, his branch, and his war. It does not mention 17 fighters destroyed. It does not mention the doctrine he rewrote. It does not mention the crews he saved, or the letter from the German pilot he kept folded next to his highest decoration. Military headstones do not have room for such things. From a factory worker's son with 2 machine guns, and a theory that every officer in the Army Air Forces called insane, to a formal doctrine change that reshaped American aerial combat for the next 50 years. Michael Aruth proved that the best ideas do not come from generals or analysts or training manuals. They come from the people who are close enough to the problem to die from it. 17 fighters destroyed. 31% higher survival rates. An estimated 4,000 additional airmen who came home because a staff sergeant decided that dead men have no use for reserve ammunition. That is the power of one person who refuses to die the way he is told. If someone in your family served in the air war over Europe, if someone you know sat in one of those positions and came home or did not come home, tell us in the comments. These stories survive because people like you keep them alive. Subscribe if you have not already. We bring forgotten stories to light every week. Stories about ordinary men who did extraordinary things and then went home and never spoke about it, because the men who were there believed that those who were not could never understand. Maybe they were right, but we owe it to them to try. Michael Aruth never asked to be remembered. He asked for 1,200 rounds of ammunition and a clear line of sight. History gave him both. What he did with them changed a war. And what that German pilot's letter proved, folded beside a medal in a dead man's desk, is the truth that every soldier on every side has always known. The men trying to kill you are not so different from you. They are just facing the other direction.